Chapter 11. Strength, agility, and stamina have increased by 2. Ha! Rayon gasped. That's actually true. His muscles twitched, starting from his forearm then down his entire body. When he clenched his fist, he could feel that his grasping power had become a bit stronger than before. Tap. His body was light, as if he got rid of a small lump of metal from his body, as he tried jumping in place. So the actual body changes when the stats increase, huh? Did you think the system made by the King of Essence was fake? This is crazy. Rayon was speechless. It didn't make any sense that his physical abilities would improve as a reward for training past his limits. He was about to say that the system was too overpowered when the second set of messages appeared. Successfully withstood Wrath's interruption. Ability points have increased further. Agility, stamina, and energy have increased by 1. They were messages announcing an additional increase in abilities from withstanding Wrath's disruption. What is that? Rayon's eyes shone as he stayed silent, feeling the euphoria rush through his body. What is this? How come it gives you extra stats for withstanding my disruption? Did you not know about it either? Of course. The system has never been stolen from me before, and the King of Essence had never failed to take over a human's body. Wrath transformed into a blue flame and flew around in front of his eyes. He looked flustered as he acted like a bee. I guess so. When Rayon nodded, a thumping sound could be heard from above the platform. Good job, everyone. Rimmer, who had stomped the ground, was smiling as he clapped his hands. Coo. Damn it. To his cheerful smile, the children who gave up frowned and lowered their heads. Sigh. I barely made it. I thought I would die. On the other hand, those who managed to hold on until the end smiled in satisfaction, despite their tired expressions. Don't worry. I won't fail you out yet. Eh? Pardon? Children opened their eyes at Rimmer's light-hearted voice. I said you were going to be tested, but I didn't say that the decision would be made today. Oh, is that true? Yes. However, if you keep training like today, then most of you will fail out. I beg your pardon? What does that mean? The children stared at Rimmer in disbelief. Since there were over 50 people who managed to run until the end, it was difficult to believe that most of them were going to fail. I clearly mentioned that you should run at full speed, but you saved your strength while running. Among the 160 of you, there was only one person who ran at full speed the entire time. Rimmer looked at Rayon for a very short moment. Except for him, everyone else preserved their strength as they ran. It's pathetic that some of you ended up giving up despite that. Ugh. That is. As the children were exposed, they couldn't find their embarrassment and their faces turned red. In addition, the sly ones that used their aura in order to not fall behind should reflect on their actions. As Rimmer finished his sentence, several trainees, including Ben, bit their lips. Well, I actually don't really care about what you do. The ones who take the test are you, not me. Rimmer grinned. It was a mysterious smile that was serious and crafty at the same time. Your status will be temporary trainee from now on. I will remove the temporary from it if you manage to pass the test that will take place in 6 months. What is that test? The green-eyed child who wanted to give Rayon a cracker earlier raised his hand with blurry eyes. It wouldn't be fun if I told you about it. There won't be a ranking, but there will be a first place, so do your best. How hard do we have to train? I will give you a simple but straightforward hint. Cracking his neck, he looked down at the children. Everyone's eyes were shining with expectations. For 6 months, complete all the training that I give you. If you just follow my instructions, without involving your personal opinions, then you will pass your test for sure. Oh, is that true? Doesn't that sound too simple? The children's expressions brightened, as if they were facing the sun, when they heard that following instructions was enough. I don't lie. If you follow my instructions, you will pass. However, the corners of Rimmer's lips lifted. That won't be easy. I'm just going to give you the instructions and let you train however you want. If you follow them the way you did today, then everyone will fail without exception. No way. The expressions on the faces of the 12 to 13-year-old children were filled with urgency, as they couldn't go back home without any results. However, there were people who stayed calm, as if they weren't concerned. They were Rayon and Renan. They didn't show any reaction, despite hearing what Rimmer said. Damn it. On the other hand, Ben, who had finished first, didn't look good. He didn't say any names, but Rimmer reproached him and complimented Rayon. Despite running faster than anyone, he felt like he had lost to that trash collateral. What insolence! Ben kept glaring at the back of Rayon's head instead of listening to Rimmer's explanation on the test. You will live in the 5th training grounds dormitory from now on. It has the best facilities and treatments, so enjoy yourselves for 6 months. Rimmer pointed at the dormitory, which could be seen behind the training ground. That's the dormitory. The children's expressions didn't get better, despite hearing that it had the best treatment. That was because they knew those benefits were only temporary. Since this is the first day, I'll finish here. You can go rest or keep training here however you want. There is also an indoor gymnasium on the left side, so feel free to use it. Rimmer went down the platform as he finished his speech. However, when he was halfway down the stairs, he turned his head and grinned. Oh, one more thing. Social standing doesn't exist here. Whether you are a king, a commoner, or a slave, you are all equals. Make sure to get along with your fellow trainees. He waved his hand, showing he really had nothing else to say now, and left the training ground. Half the instructors followed him and left, while the other half looked over the children with their backs against the wall. That rude, pointy-eared. What do you dislike about him so much? Rayon showed his confusion as he looked down on Wrath. I don't like his face. He dares to look down on the King of Essence, thinking he has everything in his grasp. 10,000 years of imprisonment in ice won't be enough punishment for such insolence. He explained, but Rayon still couldn't understand it. It looked like Wrath was just a psychopath. I'd better ignore him. Shaking his head slightly, he relaxed his tired body and mind using the ring of fire. I should check out the gymnasium. Ignoring the murmuring Wrath, Rayon entered the indoor gymnasium that Rimmer mentioned. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Rayon Zeekhart. Just how did you even run? The collaterals and children of vassal families couldn't take their eyes off Rayon's back as he entered the indoor gymnasium. There was too big of a difference between what they saw earlier and what they had heard of him before. They still couldn't believe that he managed to hold out for longer than they had, despite them constantly training their stamina. It must be thanks to the elixir. Krine Zeekhart frowned. He was the collateral who first picked a fight with Rayon. Elixir? But those living in the annex building were abandoned by the direct line. That's right. And he is the worst among the collaterals. How could he have gotten an elixir? Even if he got an elixir, it shouldn't have been a good one. I heard that the Ragged Saint gave it to him, not the family. Krine explained the situations to the collaterals, who were all wondering. Ah, the saint did. In the end, he managed to run thanks to the power of the elixir, not on his own. And he's so proud. Hearing that he'd taken an elixir given to him by the Ragged Saint, the children looked disgusted. Tisk! What a lucky guy. He got a lucky elixir despite being a mere collateral. There is really nothing likable about him. Krine smiled, as the collateral children expressed their resentment. That's why I'm saying. Shouldn't we teach him a small lesson? That's true. Apparently, he talked back to Lord Ben as well. I guess we need to show him what's up. Then when he goes back to the dormitory today. Stop it. When the collaterals were about to plan their assault, a low voice was heard from beside them. Lord Ben? You will dirty the name of Zeekhart. Ben gave a cold glance at the collaterals. How pathetic. He didn't like Rayon Zeekhart either, but oppressing him using group violence was disgraceful. He couldn't let them plan such a thing as someone who'd received the name of Zeekhart. He is a mere insect that will drop out soon enough. Just ignore him and focus on your training. Narrowing his eyes at their unsightly behavior, he left the training ground. He told us to stop. Are you really that stupid? Krine clicked his tongue, seeing the discouraged collateral children. What? He is actually telling us to do it. What? He was saying that he didn't want to get his own hands dirty, so we should proceed with it. Did you really not get it? Is that so? Of course. Finish preparing already. If we give Rayon a proper lesson, Lord Ben will also be satisfied. The 4 trainees gathered in a circle and started to plan how they would discipline Rayon. And after that, Renan Sullian, who hadn't looked at anyone so far, focused her gaze on a certain location. It wasn't Ben who finished first place, nor the collateral or the children from vassal families, nor Rimmer, who was called the Sword of Light of Zeekhart. Rayon Zeekhart. Her gaze was fixated on Rayon's back, whose performance had been less than average during the test. And then, she murmured one word. Weird. Rimmer left the training ground and climbed up the North Grave Mountain, located behind the main building. Reaching the tiger-shaped rock at the mountainside, he lifted his head. There is a guest at my napping site. When he spoke to the rock, the golden-haired old man standing on top of it inclined his head. It was Glenn Zeekhart. How did it go? There's no point in asking me that question. Rimmer smiled bitterly while leaning his back against the rock. As you already know, I have a good eye for people. And yet, I couldn't see through Rayon. I couldn't analyze his condition at all. I'm sure it was completely empty. It was as dry as a dry mop that had been squeezed out countless times. I don't understand at all how he could run until the end. Curiosity and astonishment dwelled inside Rimmer's smiling eyes. Ben and Renan have the best talent, and the other children aren't bad, either. They can certainly become the pillars that will support the family in the future. However, you were unable to judge Rayon. Glenn's gaze went past Rimmer, towards the 5th training ground. You are correct. His talents, potential, future, and tendencies, none of them could be seen. It's my first time being in the dark like this since I met you, my lord. Rimmer giggled. It has been boring ever since my energy center became ragged, but this looks fun for once. Your job isn't to look for fun. It's to raise the children into warriors befitting the name of Zeekhart. Of course. I know that. Am I not Zeekhart's the most loyal subject? Rimmer nodded like a hoodlum. If you weren't a patient and a comrade in war, your head would be flying right now. Wow, I guess having wounded my energy center was helpful for once. Glenn looked at Rimmer's energy center and around his heart, then turned his head away. You asked for the position of head instructor, so focus on your job instead of getting distracted. Of course. I feel like one of the trainees this year will become someone worthy of entrusting my future. Rimmer turned his gaze towards the training ground, where Glenn was looking. Do you mean Ben or Renan? That's a possibility, but it could be one of the recommended children, or an obstinate commoner, or a child that has been abandoned by the family. It's just a coincidence. That child can hardly become a warrior. Glenn walked down the North Grave Mountain after saying that. Rimmer stared at the back of his most esteemed warrior, and grinned. You already know it isn't. Rayon walked outside of the indoor gymnasium after checking the different equipment. Not bad. The training equipment was the latest and the best, just like Rimmer had said. The training ground certainly looked like it would raise the trainees to be the best if they could follow directions. Since he had started to train in the afternoon, the sky was already getting dark. He went out of the training ground, and was about to head over to the dormitory. Hey! From the alleyway to the right side, a low voice could be heard. When he turned his head, the 4 collaterals who picked a fight that morning were glaring at him with intimidating expressions. I heard you ingested an elixir before your first birthday. And that's how you became so cocky? If I consumed an elixir like you, I would have been way better than you. I'd be right behind Lord Ben already. The 4 children seemed to believe that they were speaking with authority as they approached. Are you really being looked down on by children? I want to end my life now. Don't worry. The flame in Rayon's eyes was ignited. You will be able to see what you want this time. Chapter 12. Rayon's hands trembled, despite his calm mind. You don't need to be so nervous. We just want to talk. The long-haired collateral at the front approached him. Rayon knew his name already. Krine Zeekhart. He was the guy who picked a fight with him that morning, and he had also shown a rather brilliant talent during the judgment ceremony. Hey! The 3 children who were next to Krine stuck themselves to Rayon's sides and his back, when Krine pointed with his chin. Talk? What kind of talk do you want? He wanted to step back, but it was impossible to retreat with 3 people blocking his way. You'll know once we get there. Follow quietly. Krine gestured with a grin, and the 2 guys next to him started to push him with their shoulders. Since Rayon was small for his age, while the collaterals were rather big, it looked like adults taking away a kid. Wait a second. How about we talk here? It's too late. You shouldn't have been so arrogant. As Rayon shrugged and lowered his gaze, the collateral children giggled and put their arms under his armpit. You told me you would show me what I wanted to see, but what are you doing now? Simmering the rice takes time. This is the same, so wait a little. Coo! Rayon was thrown to the wall after being dragged helplessly to the training grounds vicinity. It was a dark and secluded place, with no one in sight. Why are you doing this? You elixir-boosted punk. What? You got abandoned by the direct line, but you dared to boast with the power of a lucky elixir? You wouldn't even have been able to run today if it wasn't for the elixir you got from the saint. You wimp. The collaterals' expressions became fierce, like savage beasts who presented with their prey. For that ridiculous reason. The childish and shabby reason seemed to prove that they were still kids. And they don't seem to think that they might lose, not at all. Rayon sneered. I guess that's normal. Unlike him, who was 12 years old, the collaterals were 13 years old, and their bodies were also a lot bigger. Since they had been training for a long time, they didn't even consider the possibility of losing. Don't worry, we will make it unnoticeable. It's not the first time we've done this, after all. Just like what the instructor said, we are going to just have a chat between fellow trainees. The collaterals approached while swinging their fists. You're right. Rayon raised his head and smiled. Damn right. The fear and confusion in his eyes could no longer be seen. You bastard. The one with the bowl cut at the right side of him punched him. After twisting his shoulder to dodge the fist, Rayon used his right elbow to strike his chest. Gack. The bull head quacked with his head on the ground, unable to breathe. He kept scratching the ground, trying to respire. What happened? The narrow-eyed one to his left kicked at him. Whack! Rayon fended off against it using his left hand. Then he approached him and struck his solar plexus using his fist. Coo! The narrow-eyed child tumbled on the ground, grabbing his stomach as his eyes turned white. Wham! The guy from behind slammed down with his two fists clenched together. Rayon deflected it with his palm and kicked his abdomen. Huff! The biggest guy gasped, collapsing on the ground. What are you all doing? Why are you losing to that bastard? Crine, who was the last one standing, stepped back. His hands were shaking as he stuttered. We are having a talk between fellow trainees, just as you said. Rayon approached Crine, matching his steps to his retreat. Don't come any closer. Crine swung his left fist as he shouted, followed by his right fist. It was a well-trained, consecutive attack. However, the one on the receiving end wasn't a normal 12-year-old child. Crack! Rayon's hand twisted up like a poisonous snake. He grabbed Crine's left arm and twisted it to the right. Kua! Crine shrieked, unable to finish swing his right fist due to the arm-breaking pain. It's not over yet. Using his left hand like a blade, he chopped across Crine's right waist. Cack! Qua! Crine rolled on the ground while screaming as if he was facing his last moment. That's a marvelous scream. But his skull is still intact. Break it right now. Always the skull. Rayon shook his head and looked at the four collaterals, who were squirming on the ground. What shall I do? Rayon turned his head and approached the collateral children with killing intent in his eyes. Wah! Ah! What? The collaterals shivered in anguish. Their expressions weren't just confused, but terrified. Ah! Crine's teeth chattered, as if he were cold. What is this guy? It was a spirit that couldn't be felt from Ben, nor from the older children of the direct line. From Rayon they felt something other than aura, something darker than that. It's like facing an adult. And it wasn't just any adult. It was the same chilly feeling as meeting the eyes of one of the leading figures of the family. The deeper the talk, the better. Ugh! PL please. As Rayon approached with a smile, the collateral's teeth chattered as if they were looking at a god of death. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Smack. Smock. Unable to even scream, the collaterals rolled up like maggots as he kept punching them. This is refreshing for once. It's the first time that I took a liking to you. Thank you, I guess. Rayon kept beating up the collaterals, so much that Raph applauded. Moreover, he was hitting where it hurt the most, although it didn't look obvious. Coo. Yua. The collaterals couldn't even meet Rayon's eyes anymore. They were just curling up like shrimps, fresh out of water. PL please, stop. I'm sorry. Ugh. Rayon taught them a clear lesson. They shouldn't even look at his toes. What we had today was a talk between fellow trainees, right? Yes. That's right. Am I right to assume that you won't tell anyone about our talk? Of course. Definitely. Since Crine and the collaterals wanted to stop getting beaten up, they nodded their heads. Then let's get the finishing touch before ending our conversation. Finishing touch? What do you mean? Who convinced you to do this? Was it Ben? Sorry? And no, that's not the case. The collaterals shook their heads. Then what is it? Lord Ben never ordered us to do this. That's right. He actually told us to stop. It was just that we. Is that so? Rayon sneered. Judging from their frantic expressions, they weren't lying. Ben really must not have been involved. He isn't completely rotten. Ben clearly wasn't favorable to him, and had a foul mouth, but he didn't seem to be complete garbage. You'd better behave if you don't want to have another talk tomorrow. Yes, sir. Certainly. We won't even step on your shadow. Rayon turned around, hearing the collaterals' responses. When he was about to leave the alley, a notification tone could be heard. Ding! Tap. In the alley that Rayon and the collaterals left, Rimmer stepped down. Looking at the collaterals, who were helpless as they left, he licked his lips. That was an entertaining sight. He was just wasting his time like always, but he ended up watching something great. I get more curious the more I watch him. The Rayon that he saw today wasn't the pathetic patient that Glenn and Sylvia had mentioned. Is he a genius? Rayon had never been taught martial arts. He had never hit anyone, nor was he ever hit by anyone. However, the movements that he had shown proved otherwise. He avoided the first fist with the least movement possible and struck back immediately after. He finished his second and third opponents before they could even grasp the situation with a single strike on their vitals. It was a bit rough, but his punches weren't at the level that a first-timer could have pulled off. He'd thought that he just had excellent willpower, but it also looked like he was talented in martial arts. I guess he isn't a Zeekhart for nothing. Rimmer grinned, remembering how Rayon beat up the collaterals and threatened them. It reminded him of the Glenn that he had met back in the days when he had thought he was the strongest. He didn't look exceptional at first, but he was more extraordinary than anyone when he acted. He had even managed to impress Rimmer, who used to despise humans. Needless to say, that was the type of man he was. On top of that, the way Rayon threatened the collaterals using their own words was even more like Glenn. A mysterious talent among the best talents. Rimmer cheerfully rolled on the ground. My heart is racing. The corners of lips twisted up smoothly. Rayon entered room 405, following the number on the key that the instructor gave him in front of the dormitory. It was a wide room, not much different from his room in the annex building. The bed looked comfortable, and there was enough space to train the ring of fire. Then, after quickly looking around the room, he sat on the bed and brought up the message from earlier. Wrath is satisfied with your actions. Agility has increased by 1. It was a message telling him that his agility had increased, along with a message saying that Wrath was satisfied. I can increase my stats like this? Apparently, satisfying Wrath gave him points, just as withstanding his intervention did. However, Wrath roars. It's a mistake. The King of Essence isn't satisfied. It's still not enough. You should have at least cut their heads off. Since Wrath was making a fuss, he got it regardless of Wrath's intentions. Those stats that you've been getting, where do they even come from? Apparently, Wrath didn't know where the stats came from either. Do you not know either? It's your own ability, yet you know nothing. This all happened because you stole it from the King of Essence. Well, the fact still remains that you don't know. Coo. Wrath's voice trembled, as if all his pleasure from earlier had vanished. Alright, I'll check on it. Wait for me. With that, Wrath's presence disappeared. The bracelet was still there, but his soul seemed to be gone. Rayon tried swinging his hand, but nothing happened. It's silent for once. Rayon lowered his hand. Thinking that he would use this opportunity to take a bath, he headed to the bathroom on the 4th floor. After taking a quick bath, he returned to the room. Without even drying his hair, he sat down on the ground. He is actually a goose that lays golden eggs. He grinned, looking at the flowery bracelet on his wrist. Gaining stats for being acknowledged, or withstanding his interruption, was as good as getting them for free. Since he had the ring of fire and water resistance, he wasn't going to lose to Wrath, either. Only benefits existed. Shall I train before he comes back? Satisfied, he closed his eyes to practice the ring of fire. It was as he was about to start the training that he heard it. Coo, are you back already? When he opened his eyes, clicking his tongue, Wrath was on his wrist and shivering. You thief! Thief? You were stealing the power that the King of Essence had left in the main body. Main body? When he thought about it, Wrath had said he was the king somewhere, calling himself the King of Essence. He didn't remember because it wasn't important. It's Devildom. I was the monarch of the Devildom. I see. He nodded slightly, since he wasn't interested. Crack. He could hear Wrath grinding his teeth. What's that answer? You are just a dung fly, stealing the power of the King of Essence. You should kneel and worship me. You aren't giving it to me because you want to, so is there any reason why I should be thankful? Coo. Wrath just groaned, as he couldn't say anything about it. Your arrogance truly reaches heaven. Not really. Rayon shook his head. He never thought about anything like that. Wrath was just too used to being worshipped, to the point that he couldn't handle direct answers. The body of the King of Essence is currently linked to you. That's why the status window has been passed on to you. So, I have a suggestion. Suggestion? Let's make a bet. If you win, I'll give you the stat points. But if you lose, you shall take my wrath. Wrath's voice contained anger and resentment, just like when he'd met him the first time. Wrath has proposed a bet with you. Chapter 13. A bet? Rayon narrowed his eyes. What kind of bet are you talking about? He couldn't understand why Wrath suddenly wanted to make a bet. You don't need to be nervous. The King of Essence doesn't lie, nor try to deceive you. I will show you myself. A new message appeared as soon as he said that. Wrath proposes the first bet. Condition: pass the test for official trainees first in the list. Upon success, all stats +2, a random trait. Upon failure, creation of 10 points of emotion in Wrath. He could understand what he meant upon reading the message. It looked like Wrath intended to hand over his own abilities if Rayon managed to win the bet. Are you talking about ending up first in the test to become an official trainee that Rimmer mentioned? That's right. He said that there will be a first place, so the result will be clear. He still had a few questions. What do you mean, a random trait? One of the traits that the King of Essence possesses will be granted to you. Of course, its level will be downgraded to match your mediocrity. A trait. Rayon looked at Wrath, who was burning as if fuel had been added. He had always called himself a monarch of Devildom. He couldn't trust him on that, but it was obvious that he was a special existence. That meant that his random trait was most likely going to be a useful ability. One more thing. This is the most important part. What do you mean by creating 10 points of emotion in Wrath upon failure? It means what it says. You will gain the emotion of Wrath, which the King of Essence possesses. Are you saying that you are capable of controlling my feelings? It's not that much. I will be giving you a very small amount of Wrath. It really is a little bit. However, Wrath's voice contained an obvious expectation. Just like the saying goes, many a little makes a mickle, asterisk, if you keep taking in the King of Essence's wrath, you won't be able to control your emotions anymore. No matter how strong your willpower is. Was that your goal all along? Rayon looked down on Wrath coldly. It seemed that he was trying to slowly take over his body, giving up on doing it at once. You should have realized that your body changes according to the stats in the status window by now. If you partake in this bet, you will be one step closer to your revenge. Wrath calmly worked to convince him to accept his suggestion, despite being the King of Essence. Rayon felt frustrated by him for the first time. Why is he making a bet like this? Since his main body existed still, he could have just used that to conquer his mind. Rayon couldn't understand why he had to use such an elaborate method instead. As I've already said, the abilities of the main body of the King of Essence are connected to you. If I could use that power, I would have taken over your body already. Wrath responded as if he read his mind. Are you sure there's no lie? The King of Essence is a monarch of Devildom. And a monarch of Devildom doesn't lie. Ha! Rayon sighed lightly. Wrath was certainly a psychopath, but he had never lied about anything when he answered him. Do I have no choice but to eat this poisonous apple? He couldn't refuse, not when the reward was 2 points in all stats and a new special ability. On the other hand, the risk upon failure was relatively small if dangerous when accumulated. There were many outstanding children in the 5th training ground. Not just Renan and Ben, but the collaterals and the recommended children also had special talents. An average child couldn't ever dream of being first place. However, he had been reincarnated. Whatever the test was, no matter how talented the children were, he was confident he wouldn't lose if he made use of his previous life. Alright, I accept. A wise decision. You have accepted the bet with Wrath. Rayon looked into Wrath's eyes through the message. He was smiling, confident that he would win. So he smiled back. It won't go the way you think it will. The next day, before dawn, Ben opened the door to the training ground and entered. Despite being so early that the sun hadn't even risen yet, his hair was properly brushed, and his training uniform was ironed out. He was indeed an exemplary noble. Crine and a few other collaterals, who used to greet him excessively, looked away after bowing awkwardly. Why are they doing that? He remembered the incident from the day before as he wondered. Don't tell me. Did they harass him? Ben frowned. He didn't like Rayon either, but harassing him personally was an act that would stain the name of Sieghart. Pathetic bastards. Just as he was about to approach the idiots to scold them, the door opened and Rayon entered. He was completely fine. There were no injuries nor bruises, so it didn't look like he'd been hit. Instead, he looked even more confident than the day before. Eek! Hi! On the other hand, Crine and the collaterals hid in the corner like dogs as soon as they saw Rayon. What? Just what happened? Ben swallowed. He couldn't understand what kind of situation this was. Hey! He couldn't stop himself from approaching the trembling collaterals. Lo Lord Ben! Crine and the other collaterals lowered their heads with gaping mouths. Why are you trembling like that? That is. Ahem. The collaterals closed their mouths upon seeing Rayon, not Ben. Fear could be seen in their eyes. They are afraid of Rayon, instead of me? Just what did Rayon do to them, for them to be so afraid? No, nothing happened. That's right. Nothing really happened. Hee hee. The collaterals scratched their heads with awkward expressions. Did they get beaten up instead? That was the only possibility. The collaterals must have been beaten up instead when they tried to teach him a lesson. Ben turned around to look at Rayon. Just like the day before, he was just standing silently, as if he wasn't interested. So he was hiding his abilities. It was laughable that a talentless patient would hide their puny level of skills. Struggle as much as you want. No matter what he did, he was going to remain at the bottom. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. While stretching his neck, Rayon met the eyes of the collaterals that he'd had a talk with the day before. Ugh! Coo! The collateral children let out strange sounds and backed away. Huh? What's that? The collaterals, who were openly insulting him the day before, were taken aback. The sight made the other trainees wonder about the situation. Rayon turned his head at the scornful laughter. Ben was clearly jeering at him. I bet he's thinking that it doesn't matter, no matter what I do. Whatever Ben was thinking was as clear as day. He must have been thinking that it was meaningless, no matter how much a talentless boy struggled. That's a huge mistake. Since Rayon had the Ring of Fire, talent was meaningless. By the time he graduated from being a temporary trainee, he would be way ahead of Ben. That snake's eyes are annoying. Pluck them out. Not again. Back in the Devil Dom, whoever dared to move their eyes would all. Please shut up. Rayon tapped his bracelet. With a zapping sound, Wrath went silent. Why you bastard? You talk too much. The door to the training ground opened as he tried practicing with the Ring of Fire, ignoring Wrath. Stump! Past the creaking door, Rimmer and the trainers entered. Unlike the trainers, who were properly lined up, Rimmer ran up to the platform with a skip to his steps. Good morning. Rimmer smiled as he looked down at them. Yes. The temporary trainees responded loud and strong, despite it being so early in the morning. Yesterday must have been difficult since you ran at full speed even if you've been training your stamina. So, Rimmer nodded his head and smiled. Today you'll run again. At full speed. Pardon? Again? The limit of a human's stamina increases each time it is exhausted. So, sprint until I tell you to stop. While the children were frowning, two people kicked the ground. It was Renan and Ben. Pang! Unlike the day before, where they had been saving their stamina, they ran with everything they had. Ugh! It's a sprint again. The children who thought that they were going to learn something that day started running, all while complaining. Are you running again? This is boring. You can become stronger without something like this. If you kill an enemy. I'm fine with this. Rayon cut Wrath off. He kicked the ground after inhaling deeply. Really? Do you enjoy endlessly running and eating dust? I can become stronger by running. You idiot. If you leave your body to the King of Essence, you could become the strongest within a year. But there's no point if I'm not myself anymore. Stopping Wrath from talking any more nonsense, he kept moving his feet. I'm faster than yesterday. Thanks to his increased agility and stamina, he could run faster than before. He could run as fast as some of the collaterals and recommended children, who he could only catch up to at the end of the test the day before. Huh? R.A. Rayon? The eyes of children in the middle lower group widened as they saw him. It looked like they couldn't understand how Rayon was running alongside them. I'm growing fast, for sure. Rayon smiled lightly and ran with them. Having stat points on top of the Ring of Fire was making his growth unbelievably fast. However, despite running in full force, Ben and Renan were getting farther and farther away. It looked like their talents and the amount that they had trained weren't at a level he could catch up to. Yet. It's not an unpleasant environment. They made him go all out, and there were many children to catch up to. It was the perfect environment to improve himself. Rayon looked at Rimmer, who was dozing off on the platform. He was a frivolous guy, but his training method was reliable. Your training. I'll make good use of it. Stop. The sprint that began before dawn only ended after the sun finished rising. Kua. Ha. Huff. Without exception, the children were panting and lying on the ground. Barely anyone was standing, as most of them had run at full speed. This is the end of daybreak training. Daybreak. Not even morning, but daybreak. The children shook their heads when they heard that daybreak training had ended. The air is fresh at daybreak, and you can feel the mana more easily. You'd better get used to it, since you will keep doing this even after you become an official trainee. Rimmer spun his finger. It was a gesture describing how the children were going to run endlessly. Now, go get your breakfast. After running so much, how can we have breakfast? I can't eat. No way I can swallow. The children complained, still lying on the ground. You'd better eat, even if it's difficult. Since training will continue, you won't be able to handle it without eating. Although, like always, the choice is yours. With that, Rimmer left. It was as if he was telling them to do whatever they wanted. To tell us to eat after running so much. I think I should eat. Even if I throw it up later. The children staggered as they went to the dining room. The food was light, not at all greasy. It seemed they had considered the intensity of daybreak training. Warm soup, soft bread, lean meat, and a few kinds of vegetables were the entirety of the menu. The food is really terrible. I think I can eat this. The collaterals looked at Rayon, who was just staring at the food on his plate. Look at him. He isn't eating. I guess he can't eat that since he grew up sheltered in the annex building. True. Despite being the worst in rank, he must have always gotten the better treatment as a patient. Despite the other children giggling as they mocked him, Rayon was thinking about something completely different from their expectations. They give food? He would have understood it if it was after training ended. However, he had never been given food during training in his previous life. Since he had eaten grass or hunted animals on his own to appease his hunger, even when he was younger than his current age, he had never imagined that they would feed him. This place is really the best. Chapter 14. After breakfast, Rayon returned to the training ground. The food tasted terrible. If such food were brought to me back in Devilldom, the King of Essence would have smashed the chef's head in. Huh? Did you taste it? The King of Essence can indirectly share your senses, especially your sense of taste. The King of Essence has been a well-known gourmet, back in Devilldom. You really talk too much. You could have simply said you could taste it because we share senses. Silence. The King of Essence is famous for his reticence. Ugh. Stop talking for a bit. You are making it difficult for me to digest my food. Rayon stopped Wrath from talking by tapping on his bracelet, then looked up on the platform. Rimmer was lying on the platform as if he was napping. He didn't show the slightest movement, as if he had become a statue. Just looking at him irritates me. I want to pluck off his pointy ears. Wrath was billowing ice from his mouth. It looked like he was boiling with anger whenever he saw Rimmer. The Sword of Light of Sieghart, huh? Rimmer's prowess must have been excellent, since he was called the Sword of Light of Sieghart. However, rumors said that his personality wasn't just light, but frivolous. Rayon had thought that was bullshit. But looking at Rimmer, he realized it was incredibly accurate. But there's no openings. Despite his careless appearance, he wasn't showing any weakness. He'd heard Rimmer had retired because of a severe injury, but apparently a master's prowess hadn't disappeared completely. The moment the King of Essence takes over your body, those ears will be plucked. Whatever. It wouldn't happen, though. Yawning, Rimmer lazily stretched long after all the temporary trainees had finished gathering. Have you finished eating? Yes. Since the children's stamina didn't recover completely, their voices were more exhausted than at daybreak. Then we will start the next part of your training immediately. Rimmer grinned. When he looked at the wooden swords placed on a side of the training ground, the children's expressions brightened. You don't need a sword, just mimic my posture. As if he was teasing them, he stood with his feet shoulder-width apart, then bent his knees. Are we not going to learn how to use a sword? One of the collaterals shouted, raising his hand. We aren't. We thought we were going to learn with swords. He's right. Sir Sword of Light is famous for his swordsmanship, so why? Sword? That's all good, but can you run before learning how to walk? Rimmer's corner of lips twisted up. His cool smile seemed to blow a chilly wind towards them. You don't have enough stamina or willpower, nor do you have the proper posture yet. Do you think you can really learn how to handle a sword properly? I've said this already, but you don't need to follow my instructions. Since the consequences are yours to manage, anyway. It was a playful voice, but the training ground fell silent. Follow me if you want. Those who wish to do other training should move over to the right. Naturally, nobody moved. Everyone stood still and looked at Rimmer. Then let's start over. Stand with your feet shoulder-width apart. Then, bend your knees with your thighs parallel to the ground. Yes, sir. The children followed the posture without difficulty. This posture is called the riding position. It's how you ride a horse, and it's also a basic posture for every martial art including sword, spear, and fist. Keep the riding position until I tell you to stop. Yes. The children raised their arms after answering loud and clear. Since it was one of the basic postures, nobody failed to follow it. Humans really are inferior to train their bodies in such an awkward position. And you failed to take over such a human's body. Coo. That's different. I have to focus, so hush. Rayon hit the flowery bracelet and closed his eyes. This is an important moment. Even in that kind of basic training, he could gain a lot by using the ring of fire. He could make his training way more efficient than the other children. I'm gonna take a nap. Rimmer laid down and started to doze off again, and the riding position continued forever. Groan. Ugh. How long do we have to keep this up? The children's limbs trembled, as if there was an earthquake. Despite the riding position being a basic posture, it was their first time maintaining it for such a long time. There was an exception, though. The upper-tier children, including Renan and Ben, kept their proper posture. What's wrong with that guy? How is he able to hold on? He was supposed to have the worst constitution. I heard he was a patient. Rayon kept his posture while sweating heavily. The posture's accuracy alone was better than anyone in the training ground. Gah! I can't lose to him. There's no way I'll stop when he is holding on like that. The children from the lower tier were about to give up. Upon seeing Rayon still holding on, they kept their posture and grit their teeth. However, Rayon still had enough stamina to spare, despite how he looked. This is easy. In his previous life, he trained the riding posture while carrying rocks on his back and thighs. He was even younger then than he was now. The current training was nothing compared to that time. Of course, the coldness spreading throughout his tired body was creating unbearable pain. He felt like his flesh was being torn apart, and his bone was being frozen, but it was an opportunity for him to become stronger. Rayon took in the coldness in his body by rotating the rings of fire, all while keeping the riding position. As painful as it was, he could absorb a considerable amount of coldness, and the ring of fire progressed further. At the rate he was going, he felt like he could easily win the bet against Wrath, although he must have been unaware of it. When Rayon was so focused that he almost forgot it was a training on the riding position, a clapping sound could be heard from above the platform. Stop! When he came to, Rimmer stood up and nodded. The other children were sitting down massaging their thighs like they were dough. How long are you going to ignore the King of Essence? I'm sorry, I missed it. You inferior bastard. Wrath swore at Rayon, who only stared in response. It looked like he'd been mumbling all along. Huff. Ignoring Wrath, Rayon kept relaxing his thigh and waist muscles with a refreshing breath. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Ding! An extreme stamina surpassing action was performed. Stamina has increased. A message announcing an increase in stamina appeared once again. Feeling his vitality return to his trembling thighs, he stretched from his waist. Just like yesterday, some of you held on until the end while others gave up. Looking at those who were still standing, Rimmer wagged his finger. Let me repeat. I'm just giving you the instructions. I won't directly interfere with your training. Break through your limits by yourselves. Give your mind a hard smack when it starts saying you did enough. That's how you will pass the test in 6 months. He continued, maintaining his tricky smile. I won't repeat this again. From now on, I won't care whether you give up or hold on until the end anymore. After telling them to loosen up their thighs in preparation for the next day's training, Rimmer left. A mere pointy-eared bastard who believes in the nature God is talking about idealism. How ridiculous. And willpower is nothing in front of overwhelming power. That's not true. What do you mean? You do need willpower. Rayon shook his head while loosening up his legs. You believe that because you are a weakling that has never felt an overwhelming power. If you felt the power of the King of Essence, you would be worshipping me right now. I managed to withstand your attack with willpower. That's because the King of Essence hasn't recovered the original power yet. And I'm just a kid. That is. Wrath's voice dropped powerlessly. Of course, willpower isn't meaningless. Willpower was similar to stamina and strength. There was a limit, but it got stronger the more it was used. He had been in many pinches in his previous life, and he had managed to survive because of his extreme stamina and willpower. Then let's get going. After loosening his thigh and hip muscles, he entered the indoor gymnasium. There were many training tools to help increase his strength and agility. Are you training again? Yes, I am. He nodded. The stats increased when they were pushed to the limit, like squeezing a dry mop trying to get water out of it. Rayon didn't think of the extra training as something painful or boring. It was something to look forward to. He started with basic training, including push-ups and planks. This is so annoying. It's like watching a caterpillar hanging on a tree. A caterpillar that can only crawl will one day become a butterfly and fly away. The only way for you to become a butterfly is to hand over your body to the king of essence. That's not a butterfly. It's a poisoned moth. Stop daydreaming. Rayon shook his hand and bent his arms once again. For push-ups, the number wasn't the important part. He slowly bent and stretched his arms in a way that would stimulate his muscles the most. He felt like his chest muscles were going to snap, but he welcomed that pain. It would become his stats and stamina. After push-ups, he started to exercise his abdominal muscles. That was when the other children started to enter the gymnasium. After throwing him a glance, they separated to start their own training. Renan and Ben also entered and checked out the different equipment. Renan isolated herself and got herself a tool, and Ben walked out after glaring at Rayon for a bit. Ben went to where the wooden swords were placed and grabbed one to start swinging it. Whoosh! The collateral children who usually followed Ben got themselves a wooden sword as well, and began to practice the swordsmanship that they had trained in. He grabbed a sword. He did. Aren't you going to do the same? I don't need it yet. What Rayon needed wasn't a sword, but the stamina, strength, and agility to serve as a base. Ben and other children's swordsmanship wasn't even at a beginner level. For novices, training with swords without an instructor was just a waste of time. Without caring for what the others were doing, Rayon continued the boring yet difficult training, only wishing to achieve more progress the next day. Renan Sullivan wasn't interested in others. That didn't mean that she looked down on others due to her outstanding talents. It was because she had locked the door to her heart the day she had been terribly disappointed by the one she trusted. However, there was one person who had caught her eye recently. It wasn't Rimmer, the Sword of Light, nor Ben Zeekhart, who everyone said was her rival. Rayon Zeekhart, Sylvia's son, who was kicked out of the direct line to become a collateral, kept attracting her attention. Why do I keep paying attention to him? It was the first time she was interested in someone or felt familiar with someone. Is it because of the coldness? Rumors said that Rayon's mana circuit bore an extreme amount of coldness. It was possible that her frost ability was making her feel familiar with his coldness. That must be it. Since she realized the reason, she tried to stop paying attention to him. However, no matter how much she tried, she couldn't take her eyes off him. He is growing quickly. Rayon's growth was abnormally fast. When she had seen him a month ago in the audience room, he had been a skinny boy with no muscles. However, he had gained some muscles since then. Moreover, he was at the lowest tier the other day, but he had managed to catch up with the middle-lower tier. Everyone said Renan herself was born with a heavenly talent, but she thought it was impossible for her to progress that quickly. It just didn't make any sense. Huff. Comfortably lifting a 60 kilograms weight, she kept stealing a glance at Rayon. It's really strange. Chapter 15. Unlike the other children panting on the ground, collapsed from their training, Rayon sat on the equipment for training the chest muscles after exhaling lightly. This isn't called a legendary cultivation technique for nothing. Although his body was extremely tired, the rings of fire rotating around his chest recovered his stamina and willpower. He had just exhausted his stamina from training, but he became capable of going all out once again. There was a good reason that it was called one of the most valuable treasures of the continents. Huff. Setting the weight to 5 kilograms heavier than the day before, Rayon lifted the weight. He slowly moved in a way to maximize the range of motion of his pectoral muscles, to stimulate it as much as possible. Tap. When he got up after finishing 6 sets, he heard someone sitting down at the equipment next to him. Who is it? The only person who would come near him was the green-haired weirdo, with a pocket on his belly. Rayon thought it was strange and turned around. Renan? The person sitting next to him was Renan Sullivan, with her long silver hair flowing down. Renan set her weight to be a lot heavier than Rayon's and started to use the equipment. Hup! Her weightlifting posture was remarkably similar to Rayon's. She didn't care about the lifting count nor the weight but focused on stimulating her muscles. What was that? I don't know, either. After watching her for a bit, Rayon left. In order to stimulate his muscles more thoroughly, he sat on other training equipment. Hup! After setting the load to exceed his maximum capacity, he lifted the weight while rotating the ring of fire. Huff! He normally should have subtracted 10 kilograms from that weight, but the ring of fire allowed him to handle that much, and more often. He could hear someone sitting next to him again. He put the weight down after training until his arms and chest trembled. Really? He turned his head without getting up. As expected, Renan was there. She set a weight higher than him once again and started to lift. Why is she doing this? Rayon narrowed his eyes. Renan didn't pay any attention to Rimmer, let alone other trainees. He couldn't understand why she was copying him, by lifting weights the exact same way he did. I must be mistaken. When he thought about it, it was normal to train the smaller muscles after training bigger muscles. Rayon got up, thinking that it was just a matter of coincidence. However, he headed to the equipment to train shoulder muscles just to be sure. Creak! After setting the weight, he lifted it while feeling the stimulation to his shoulders. When he finished a set, Renan appeared in front of him. After staring at him for a bit, she sat down next to him and set her weight. It was a heavier one, once again. Huff! She casually started lifting the equipment while looking in front of her. Are you really going to do nothing after being provoked like this? How long are you going to hide like a rat? A provocation. Rayon turned his head to look at her. Renan just kept lifting, as if she wasn't interested in him. What is she thinking? The first and second times could have been coincidences. However, her copying his shoulder training couldn't have been one. Yet, he couldn't understand what she was thinking. Her eyes were as cold as ice, yet they were also blurry, making it impossible to grasp her intentions. You don't understand, huh? She is clearly provoking you by acting as if she is better than you. Punch her in the face, right now. Whether it was a child, an adult, or a woman didn't matter to Wrath. He was angry at everything, just like his name suggested. Please stop. For just a moment, just stop. Rayon ignored Wrath's anger and left the equipment to start squatting. As expected, Renan followed him and bent her thighs with a heavier weight. What? Why are those two together? Why is Lady Renan paying attention to that loser? The children in the gymnasium opened their mouths wide, watching Renan training right next to Rayon. Screech. Ben, who came back to the gymnasium after swordsmanship training with the collaterals, grit his teeth. Why is Renan there? The collaterals saw Renan training next to Rayon and glared at them. Rayon looked at Renan, who attracted everyone's attention. With silver hair shining like moonlight, fair skin as white as snow, and thin and sharp facial features, she was an ethereal beauty. Except her eyes, which looked senseless, like she had a piece missing. Do you have something to say to me? When Renan finished a set, he approached her. Upon hearing his question, she stared at him for a while, as if he was a curious creature. No. After responding, she started to lift her equipment once again, with more weight this time. I don't know, either. Rayon shrugged and got up from his equipment. Since she was going to lose interest soon anyway, he decided to just ignore her. As he was thinking about what to do since his routine was suddenly changed, he heard small stepping sounds behind him. When he turned around, he could see Renan scanning different parts of his body with her purple eyes. If you have something to say, say it. Without responding, Renan met his eyes. Her eyes looked like a cat that had just finished its nap. Rayon sighed quietly and walked over to another piece of training equipment. Renan followed right after him and used the same equipment. ******************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************* week had passed since Renan Sullivan began observing Rayon Zekart. She looked for Rayon as soon as she entered the indoor gymnasium. Like always, he was lifting weights before anyone else. It's heavier than yesterday. Rayon's weight was 5 kilograms heavier than the day before, which wasn't actually that strange. It wasn't strange to increase weight if you worked out hard enough. However, what if that weight increased every day? That wouldn't be normal. How is he doing that? Most people didn't realize it, but Rayon Zekart had increased the weight of his equipment by over 10 kilograms last week. Even considering that growth was faster for a child, the number was ridiculous. He was supposed to be a patient. His face was pale, and his limbs were as weak as twigs. However, he could withstand better than anyone in the training ground. Is it thanks to the posture? The posture Rayon used to lift his weights was a bit different from the others. She thought his absurd speed of growth might have been thanks to that posture. With that conclusion in mind, Renan sat on the equipment next to Rayon, who was training his chest. She started to lift the weights the same way Rayon did. It didn't feel much different from usual. Only her muscles felt slightly more stimulated. It's not a big deal. Thinking that it was meaningless, she was about to go back to her usual posture. Huh? When she inhaled a cool and mysterious fragrance coming from Rayon, her weight became as light as a feather. What happened? She felt like her strength and agility had suddenly increased. The weight that should have been difficult to raise had become so light. However, once Rayon, who was watching her for a while, left, that strange sensation immediately disappeared as well. Missing the sensation, Renan stared at Rayon's back as he headed to the next piece of equipment. Perhaps. Renan followed Rayon and moved next to him. She set her weight to be heavier than usual and lifted. Ugh! It looked like it was too much since it was too difficult to lift it. However, once Rayon started to exercise, the cool air coming from him made her weight become lighter once again. That was it. It wasn't her imagination. She was capable of lifting a weight 10 kilograms heavier than usual, as if her abilities really were enhanced. Huff! Despite lifting more than she could handle, it didn't seem to overload her shoulders nor arms at all. Once she cheerfully finished her exercise, Rayon was standing in front of her. Do you have something to say to me? Blonde hair and red eyes, the boy with the proof of his Zeekhart heritage spoke. No. Renan shook her head, and Rayon moved on to the next piece of equipment after staring at her for a moment. I should try following him around. Eyes shining like a cat's, she followed Rayon. She liked that she could train with heavier weights, but she was even more attracted to the cool fragrance coming from him. Rimmer climbed the mountain behind the main building in Zeekhart. Tisk. He shook his head and clicked his tongue as he was about to climb up the flat rock at the mountainside. You must be really worried about your grandson, to visit my napping rock every day. From the top of the rock, an old man who gave the impression of a sharp sword came down. It was Glenn Zeekhart. Without saying anything, Glenn stared at the barely visible mountain ridge. Humph. Rimmer snorted and leaned back against the rock. The two of them watched the setting sun for a long time, not saying a word. You should just ask instead of acting so dignified. Rimmer sighed and jumped up on the rock where Glenn was sitting. The children are doing great. They are training so hard that they are honestly exceeding my expectations. Exceeding your expectations? I've let them train on their own accord. I know that. Honestly, a 12 or 13-year-old child doesn't have much willpower. I thought most of them would start slacking after a week. However, he wasn't exaggerating. When he planned his training, his intention was to pick about 20 people out of the 160. More of them are going to pass than I thought, thanks to my lord's grandson. My grandson? Are you talking about Ben? Stop pretending when you already know I'm talking about Rayon. I don't know what happened on the training ground. You told me to not mind it, since you would take care of it. Seriously? Rimmer scratched his red hair. It was annoying that this old man, who had been waiting for him because he was worried about his grandson, was pretending he didn't know anything. That guy, he is different from what my lord and Sylvia believe. What do you mean? Glenn's eyes were the same, but his voice was clearly different. You wanted him to drop out as soon as possible to avoid getting hurt, since he was weak both mentally and physically. I never said that. I just told you to not discriminate. Anyway, I also tried to fail him out as fast as possible. Rimmer's blue eyes shone. He's a monster. His willpower isn't anywhere near normal. It's even better than a warrior who has gone through tens or hundreds of battlefields. Rimmer had seen plenty of talents throughout his life, and even among them, Rayon was exceptional. It was difficult to believe how much he had grown, that he had to look at him twice every morning. When the training started, Rayon was one of the worst among the 160 people. Only 3 weeks later, he's in the middle tier. Do you think that should be possible? I once thought that Rayon wasn't actually a patient and was just hiding his strength. However, that isn't possible. His body still has a brutal coldness running through it. Recently, he kept paying attention to Rayon during training, as he really went all out on every moment. I'm considering singling him out to give him personal training. Since he did his best in the training that he had prepared, Rimmer couldn't help but feel more affection for Rayon than the others. You would go that far? He won't stop, even if his body becomes frosty like a winter tree. The other children are training hard because they are stimulated by him. He is the 5th training ground stimulant. Glenn scratched his chin with an expressionless face, but he couldn't hide his slight rise to the corner of his lips. It looks like a lot more children will end up passing than I expected. Despite murmuring it was bothersome, his eyes were smiling. Isn't it overloading Rayon's body? Glenn finally spoke. Rimmer secretly gulped. It's more than I thought. He already knew that Glenn had a special affection for Rayon, but he didn't think he would specifically ask that. It looked like the affection he couldn't give to his youngest daughter was transferred to Rayon. Well, that part is a bit strange. He is certainly overworking himself, but he recovers so quickly that it's mysterious. Is it impossible to figure out, even for you? That's what I'm saying. It's the first time my eyes can't grasp someone after the 10 heavens of the continent. Rimmer tilted his head as he answered. He was better than anyone at analyzing others' potential or condition, but Rayon was different. Honestly, Rayon was more mysterious than Glenn, who rose to the rank of the continent's strongest. Rimmer. Yes? You aren't Rayon's personal instructor, but the head instructor of the 5th training ground. Pay attention to everyone who will become the family's strength, instead of only thinking about Rayon. Glenn walked down the mountain after saying that with a lot of dignity. Ha! Rimmer snorted to that ridiculousness. What the hell is he saying when he came to listen to Rayon's story?